members and officers, leave your microphones on mute during the meeting unless or until you want to. Of interest. Does anybody have any interest to declare? I'm not seeing any indications, so I'll carry on. Item 2, which is on pages 1 to 10 of your agenda, is the minutes of the last meeting on the 20th of November. Are the minutes of the last meeting agreed? Yeah.
Agreed.
Item number 3, Mayoral Reports. There are none to be considered this morning. And then we go on to item 4, which is the Mayoral Recommendations, and we have 5 public recommendations to consider. The first one, item A, is the acceptance of grant to support clinically extremely vulnerable individuals, and that's on pages 11 to 14 of your agendas. And the recommendation seeks approval to accept a grant for £670,000 from MHCLG, and that's to be used to provide clinically extremely vulnerable individuals with advice, practical support to protect themselves during this ongoing COVID restrictions. Any comments on that from anybody? No? Are the recommendations as set out in the report agreed? Yeah. Thank you. Item B is expansion of Blueberry Park Primary School, which is on pages 15 to 19. And this recommendation seeks approval to procure and award contracts for building works to expand the school, subject to the outcome of a formal consultation process. If the consultation concludes with support for the expansion, then this will provide much needed additional places for local children. Barbara, would you like to say a few words?
Yes, thanks, Chair. It's twofold welcome news, really, Chair. Firstly, we need to increase sufficiency in the city. We need more numbers and more places for children. And the second is the school will grow from 1.5 to 2 form entry. And given the Denford housing development on the adjacent land, a lot of which, a good majority of which I think will be family homes, the extra places will definitely be needed. So I think it's good for the community and good for the school. It's easier to manage actually 2 forms in terms of staffing. So it's good news and welcome development if it goes through. Thank you.
Thanks, Barbara. Anybody else? Not seeing any indications. So are the recommendations as set out in the report agreed? Yeah. Item C is procurement of supplier of occupational health services, and this recommendation seeks approval to undertake that procurement and as a result award a contract to supporting our employees. Are the recommendations set out in that report agreed? Yep. Item D is acceptance of funds from DEFRA to support delivery of Port Health EU transition and readiness, and this recommendation seeks approval to accept 472,000 of additional grant funding from DEFRA for the Merseyport Health Authority. The funding is essential to enable this service to prepare for new sanitary checks on imports of animal products from the EU that will be introduced in stages after the end of the transition period. Even with this funding, there will be considerable pressure on the ports due to the impacts of Brexit, and it was really important to recognise the challenges which this brings. Sharon, is there anything you would like to say?
No, just to echo your comments around the challenges in terms of the Port of Liverpool being able to provide this necessary service once, obviously, the changes come into place.
Thanks, Sharon. Anybody else? No? So are the recommendations as set out in the report agreed? Yep, thank you. Item E is the Better Care Fund 2020-21, and this recommendation seeks approval to the proposed expenditure allocations in respect to the Better Care Fund for that period. The total value of the Better Care Fund for 2020-21 is 123 million, comprising with a planned level of CCG contribution of over 73 million. There's also additional winter pressure resource allocations and the disabled facilities grant, as required by government. Paul, would you like to say a few words on this?
Thanks very much, Deputy Mayor. This is an important part of our joint working with the NHS so that we combine our respective financial capacity to deliver better outcomes for the population of Liverpool. This is a huge project, as you have rightly indicated, £123 million, representing a major investment in services which stretch across the health and social care system. It represents partnership working with our NHS colleagues and delivers many of the priority programmes, including the Disabled Facilities Grant and other aspects of enabling people to live independently in their community. It's something I entirely welcome, and it builds on our previous good experience and good working relationships we have here in Liverpool, and I'm really pleased to be able to recommend it to Cabinet.
Thanks, Paul. Any other comments? No? Are the recommendations as set out in the report agreed? Yep. Thank you. We do have one partially exempt report, and I suggest that we consider that as only the appendix to the report is exempt. So unless any Cabinet member has questions on the exempt part of that report, then we'll consider the main report in public. Are there any questions on the exempt elements? No? Then we will consider the report now. So the report is part 2, item 3A, which is the extension of Liverpool City Council's existing loan to Liverpool Airport property. The recommendation seeks approval to extend the time frame of the existing loan arrangements made to the company as detailed in the report. Are the recommendations as set out in the report agreed? Yep. Thank you. We have no reports for agenda items 5 to 8. In respect of item number 9, Mayoral Announcements, I'd just like to give my thanks and pay tribute to the Army and all of our council staff and partners who've been doing a fantastic job. I'm sure Paul and Martin would agree. In the testing centres that we've had, I know we've seen some reduction and we're moving over to that transition period now. And I think sort of as they say, the proof is in the pudding in respect of how much our rates have come down over this period, obviously linked with the lockdown as well. So I think it's been a massive success. And I'd also like to thank the majority of the public of Liverpool who have really taken those centres on board and gone in weekly and had tests and are really ensuring that, you know, our city is as safe and as protected as it can be. So thanks for that, Barry. I can see you indicating.
Yeah, sorry, Deputy Mayor, we've got item 3B on Denford Road.
Colleagues, just to advise, item
sorry,
3B is wholly exempt.
It's wholly, okay, right. Sorry.
So we'll come on to that in the exempt item. Paul?
Thanks very much, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, a huge vote of thanks to our partners in the armed services, but also particularly to our own public health team and our Director of Public Health, who have been absolutely phenomenal in the amount of energy that's been engaged in this pilot. This is the very first pilot in the Western world, which we've learnt an enormous amount from, both things that have worked really well, things that have worked less well, and it will influence the lessons on how we deal with the rest of the pandemic in the weeks and months that are coming. So a huge thanks to everybody that's played a part in it. I think it's been a triumph for Liverpool. It showed what we already have known, that this is a can-do city, a city that's led the world as having the first ever public health director, the first ever public wash house with Kitty Wilkinson's wash house, and now the first ever mass pilot program for mass asymptomatic testing in the Western world. And I think we can rightly hold our head up high, and the lessons that we've learned from it are cascading through the way in which we are managing the public health crisis that we have here with the pandemic, which I'll touch on a little bit later on. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Well, I have got Tony, and I totally agree with you. Matt Ashton and the team have done a phenomenal job. I'd also like to pay tribute to lots of council officers who've been in the background, as well as the public health team, who people probably don't see, who had many sleepless nights preparing for this transition period, and the training that they're undertaking, and our communications team as well, who I think have been absolutely brilliant, and as well as, you know, community activists, local councillors within their communities, who particularly last weekend really pushed that message out for people to go and get tested in those areas where the numbers weren't as high. Tony?
Thanks, Wendy. Completely support what you've both said. Fantastic effort by our public health team, by the Army, but as you say, Wendy, a whole host of people from our culture team, from our community, from our comms team, and a whole host of other people dealing with this. At the start of the mass testing pilot, the smart testing pilot, as we now refer to it, we set 3 strategic objectives. 1, to reduce deaths and people's health being impaired by COVID. 2, to protect jobs and businesses. And 3, to get the people of Liverpool some more freedoms more quickly as a result of the testing process. And I think we have achieved all of those. The key thing now as we move into the transition phase is to protect those hard-won gains that we've made as a city and make sure we don't slip back into a third wave. And that requires us to continue to be vigilant, to continue to encourage people to get tested. And if we are able to do that, there's a potential for us to open up even more freedoms for local people. But the real danger if people don't be vigilant, if they don't wear face coverings, hand sanitizer, and keeping social distance, is that this pandemic comes back again in terms of the numbers, and we put at risk all the gains that we've made, because it's going to be some months before mass vaccination is in place. So the danger is still very much there. But the progress we've made as a city is, in my view, absolutely phenomenal. And from as Chief Exec, the thanks to our colleagues who have pulled all the stops out have been absolutely amazing.
Thanks, Tony. Any other comments? Anything from yourself, Matt, or any other officers on that? No? Okay. Thank you. We now have one final item of business to deal with, which is fully exempt. So before I formally move the resolution to end the public part of proceedings, I know that Paul, who has just took a big deep breath, I haven't forgotten, has got a couple of things he'd like to say during the public meeting. And if any other cabinet members do, of course, I'll bring them in. Paul. Remember, you're on camera, Paul.
Thank you, Councillor Simons. Yes, and I was on mute, and you could still hear me taking a deep breath. That's impressive. I just wanted to thank the staff, both in terms of our adult social care team, but working with their colleagues in the public health team, for the phenomenal task of rolling out our Liverpool designed pilot to allow greater visiting to care homes. It can't be stressed that this is an incredibly complicated set of interlocking factors, making sure that the staff in the care homes are well trained, making sure that the visits can take place in a way which mitigates and brings down to the lowest reasonably practicable level any risk of inward transmission, and also making sure that the other care home residents are kept safe as well. We have designed a system here, designed a pilot, which we launched yesterday, 11 homes involved in it, which has facilitated and the visits to residents taking place, and it's gone smoothly. We've seen other pilots not going off quite as smoothly, and I think the reason for that is because we put a lot of prior work into making sure that everybody came along with us. And I know that it isn't always able to move as fast as some of the more enthusiastic residents would like to see, but it's really important that we do so safely to protect everybody. And people have to understand on a wide basis that not every test is 100% able to guarantee a particular result, and in an environment which has high consequences, for example, a care home for an infection getting in, it's incumbent on us to work with our partners in the care homes to make sure that there are high safeguards associated with any increase in visiting. So a big thank you to our care home staff who are managing this on the ground in those care homes. A huge thank you for our residents and also our families of those residents who are being visited, together with the professional team in the council that have enabled it to go forward. I hope it continues to roll out successfully, and then we'll be able to roll it out to a wider number of care homes in the city. It is a good example of partnership working, and we fully understand the importance of being able to safely visit care home residents for families and loved ones, because it's good for the mental well-being of the residents and also their wider families and loved ones. So thank you very much, and we thank the wider community for their patience in us getting where we've got to.
Any other comments from anybody else? No? We now have one final item of business to deal with, which is fully... Oh, sorry, Gary.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Whilst we're thanking people, and I really want to thank our colleagues in revenue and benefits and also in regeneration in the extreme hard work and success in awarding business grants over the last month and the new grants that have been announced. It hasn't been easy. New processes have had to be developed. People are working long hours, and for that I'm extremely grateful on behalf of the businesses of which we all have relationships with. But I'd also want, whilst we're live, highlight to our friends in the public, and particularly those businesses who have been forgotten by the government and have been excluded, to recognise that the City Region, Liverpool City Council and the other authorities are the first to provide grant assistance to the excluded and the forgotten. So if any self-employed individual, because perhaps they are a new business or their tax was too low over a period of time and they've not had any cash, then please go on to www.liverpool.gov, and there's a lovely helpful link at the top of the screen in a red box that takes you to the coronavirus support, and look for help for businesses, because musicians, coffee suppliers, crockery suppliers, to those in the retail and leisure industry, company directors who've only taken dividends and not had any help whatsoever, they are getting help from the City Council and others. So one was a thank you, and that's very important. And bear with us, please, if you're a business waiting for a response, but also please do make an application. And I'm seeing very few musicians and artists who work with bars and cafes and restaurants and attractions not applying yet. And they really should be applying now, because there's only so much money available. And if they don't apply, they may just be too late and not get anything. And we really do want to help every single business in the city and every job continue to be there for us all. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. So, as I said before, we have one final item of business to deal with, which is fully exempt. Before I formally move the resolution to end public part of proceedings, I would like to take this opportunity to thank everyone who has come online to view today's meeting. Can I now move that members of the press and public be excluded during consideration of the remaining item of business, and that the public live stream of proceedings be ended at this point? And that's because the report involves exempt information relating to the financial or business affairs of particular persons or businesses. The public interest in making the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. Is that agreed?